In the medical room, Neo sat on the bed as the warehouse medic Lawrence carefully finished wrapping a bandage around his wounded hand before walking away to clean his own hands in the sink. Lawrence, bald with a grey beard, was 50, well-mannered, and looked out for all those that walked into his office. Neo clenched his fist a couple of times, staring at it without emotion as he did so, almost as if he secretly relished in the pain. "If you don't mind my asking, Neo, how did you get that wound?" said Lawrence. "It's pretty nasty." "I don't know," said Neo. "I think I broke something." Lawrence began drying his hands. "Well, people have given me worse reasons for being sent in here," he said. "Maybe jot down what needs replacing." "I don't think I can replace it," Neo muttered to himself. "What was that?" "Nothing." "Alright then, well, I'm all done with you. Hope to see you anywhere again but here, eh?" As if he had forgotten what a handshake was, Neo stared at Lawrence's hand as the doctor held it out before slowly gripping it very firmly. They shook before letting go without issue. While Lawrence sat at his desk, Neo stood for a moment, staring at the doctor and looking at the sharp tools on the metal tray. Before long, he turned and left the room. In Nathan's office, the smug employee hung up his phone and leaned back into his chair. Like Neo, his office was rather lush considering the fact it was in a highly industrial warehouse, complete with a very nice mahogany bookshelf and other expensive-looking decorations inherited from his father, the most attractive one being a tall gold lamp with a floral green shade. Nathan cracked a sly smile, pride and smugness written all over his face. He leaned down to reach one of his desk's lower drawers, pulling out a bottle of Bondabage rum and a rocks glass. He poured himself some rum and took a large sip. "Life is good for Nathan Carter," he declared. Nathan continued to smile before looking over some papers and writing something down. He took another sip of rum and topped himself up. After finishing his second drink, he left his office, carrying his briefcase in one hand and his coat over his other forearm. He had hoped to go unnoticed, only to bump into Daniels, the head of the building, with the two men startling each other. Daniels was a Weasley man of 54, balding, wore thick-rimmed glasses, and had a weirdly high-pitched and raspy voice, almost like a chain-smoking Mickey Mouse, taking his job seriously every step of the way. "Jesus!" said Nathan. "You got me there, Daniels." "Where are you off to?" said Daniels. "I have to run back and take that call from corporate, then have to take some of the paperwork relating to last month's incident back here for you to look over." "How long do you think you'll be gone then?" "A couple of hours, maybe less." "You've marked this down on your schedule for Whittaker to confirm?" "I have, yes." "Good. Also, have you seen Smite anywhere?" "Yes, he finished that paperwork to do with those irregularities from the supplier and put himself on the floor," said Nathan. "We've had a staff shortage today." "I know that, but he's caused a disturbance," said Daniels. "Disturbance?" "He cut his hands and got blood all over a couple of deliveries. They're supposed to go out this evening. They'll have to be completely decontaminated and repackaged." "Jesus. Is he okay?" "I don't know. Just get back here as soon as possible. I might need you to go over a report regarding this." Nathan agreed before continuing. Daniels continued his search for Neo. Elsewhere, Neo was at work again, his bandages preventing any more blood from contaminating the packages. Daniels, accompanied by the two supervisors, spotted Neo hard at work. They marched over to him and Daniels yelled out his name. Neo, as well as the other workers, stopped working to acknowledge their superiors. He bordered on catatonic, his face and attitude completely void of emotion. "What happened earlier?" said Daniels. "You had an unpatched bloody hand and caused a delay in processing." "It's patched now," said Neo. "But it wasn't when you contaminated that box," said the second supervisor. "I apologise, sirs." "Would you rather return to your office or do you need the rest of the day off, Smite?" said Daniels. "No, I think I can handle it, sir, Neo replied. Well, you shouldn't be out on the floor. Go back to your office, Smite. I'm sure being one man short won't hurt. We're quite a few men short, Daniels. We're already falling behind schedule. Daniels thought to himself for a second before looking at the first supervisor for a second opinion. We'll keep an eye on him, said the supervisor. All right then, said Daniels. You sure you're right to keep going? It doesn't hurt or anything? No, said Neo. It doesn't. Well, just be careful, Smite, said the second supervisor. One step at a time. Neo nodded and told them he understood before promptly returning to work. The other floor workers followed his lead. Satisfied, Daniels and the supervisors walked off to resume their business. At the diner, all the mothers and non-working fathers were conversing as they drank fresh cola and ate cheap defrosted food. A waitress poured some fresh coffee for them. Betty, still composing herself after the disappointment of her rejection, entered the diner, taking a seat with her so-called friends in one of the booths. Well, this is a surprise, said one of the mothers. Did you get bored of old Smitey, eh? Well, like I said, we were overdue for a catch-up and we had it, said Betty. Now I'm dying for a gin. Who's with me? One of the other mothers scoffed. Betty gave all of them a funny look before one of them finally declared that she wouldn't mind one either. Two of the non-working fathers concurred and joined them with a half lager each. Back at the Smite house, Hattie, a little more done up and neat from her clothes to her hair, heard the front doorbell ring as she finished taking some chicken out of the freezer. She approached the front door and opened it. I believe I called, said a sly voice through an arrogant smirk. It was Nathan. His tie was gone and his top shirt button was undone to expose a fraction of his shaven chest. And I believe I picked up, Hattie replied. You going to, invite me in? Maybe. Nathan grinned and walked into the house, with Hattie keeping direct, suggestive eye contact with him as she backed away. Nathan swung the door shut and embraced Hattie. They began to kiss passionately. Within moments, Nathan had Hattie almost completely undressed in the kitchen on one of the dining table chairs. He removed his shirt and caressed her buttocks, occasionally squeezing and spanking them while performing oral sex on her. Hattie moaned. When she came for the first time, she stood up and ordered him to go up to the bedroom. Once upstairs, Hattie removed her bra, her only remaining piece of clothing, and Nathan removed the rest of his clothes. The two of them proceeded to have slow-moving missionary sex. Their moans were deep and prolonged. To satisfy her more dark desires, Hattie began to scratch Nathan's back very aggressively, causing him to wince and moan in pain. Shh! She hissed. Oh, God. Shh! Take it. Thrust into me. Oh, God. Oh, be quiet and take it. Take it. Take it. Give it to me. Hattie quickly changed their position to reverse cowgirl, and the two of them achieved a mutual orgasm as she felt Nathan's condom fill up. She slowly and deeply scratched his thighs. He took a few deep breaths and tried to quietly contain the pain. Hattie slid herself off of Nathan's phallus and lay next to him, giving him a single kiss before making herself comfortable. She took a cigarette out of her bedside table drawer and began to smoke. Nathan got up and hastily began to dress himself while sitting at Hattie's dressing table. Thank you for that, she said. I think we both needed it. What can I say? Said Nathan. Unlike that husband of yours, I'm pretty sex positive. Don't be so direct. It's a healthy release. You glad I used a condom? Well, the last thing I need is another one of those things running about. Let alone another one not related to Neo. Speaking of which, I need to pick them up soon. I'll see you later then? Probably. A little off-put by Hattie's coldness, Nathan chuckled awkwardly. He straightened his shirt collar and walked over to give her a kiss. She looked away and finished up her cigarette instead, allowing him only to kiss her cheek before he left the room. Hattie waited to hear the sound of the front door being closed before she felt comfortable getting out of bed again. At the school's home time, Hattie was the first to arrive, patiently waiting outside the school gate for her children to be let out. The other parents, including Betty, approached as the bell rang, allowing all the screaming students to sprint out of the building. Hattie kept a sharp eye out for her children while very deliberately avoiding looking in the direction of Betty. Betty looked over at Hattie ever so occasionally, still embarrassed. Francesca and her friend Karen approached Karen's mother. Tom and 3 friends of his approached Hattie, sharing some idle young boy chatter before saying goodbye. "Hello, Tom," she said. "Where's your sister?" "I'm not her babysitter," he said. "Be quiet. We have to get home straight away." "Oh, come on, Mum. They were just about to ask if I could go to the park with them and their mums. You could come too." "We've got no reason to. I've got dinner ready in the house. It's chicken, mashed potatoes and salad." "Get rid of the salad and it's perfect." Fiona, looking down at the ground, approached her family. Hattie was relieved to see her daughter and quickly led the children away as Betty made a vain attempt to approach her. Within seconds, the Smite family were in the wagon and on their way home, leaving Betty disgruntled as she saw Francesca off. At the warehouse, it was nearing the end of the day. Everyone was tired. Neo was operating a forklift, carefully placing a container on a high level of a shelf unit. Afterwards, he drove over to a stack of crates, carefully grabbing one and driving it over to and putting it down next to another pile. As Neo drove back towards the first pile of crates, the sound of the pulse returned. Each pulse gave him a vision of the forklift shoving into someone's head, Hattie cooking breakfast in a black void, Neo receiving the pocket watch from his grandfather, Neo wearing Fiona's face as a mask as he marched through barbed wire in a misty black void, rain pouring down a window, and a hapless worker sluggishly moving boxes around like a prehistoric ape. Neo's blank eyes stared intently as he autonomously drove towards the hapless worker seen in his visions. The worker turned, saw the forklift, and screamed as one of the forks was rammed directly into his head, ripping through it and turning it into mush as the vehicle flattened his now headless corpse. Another worker standing by witnessed the violent scene, but his cries were far too late. The alarmed workers and the second supervisor who heard the commotion ran towards the scene of the crime. Neo was nowhere to be found, having disappeared from the forklift. The first supervisor and Eric joined shortly afterwards. One of the workers turned away and vomited upon seeing the sight. Daniels marched onto the scene. "What the hell is going on?" he cried. One of the men began to scream in horror. Daniels was repulsed and turned away as soon as he saw the corpse. He noticed a third supervisor on the ground nearby with a bleeding head. The first supervisor ran over to him with some other workers and helped him sit up. Daniels ran over as well. "What the hell happened?" said Daniels. "That fucking psycho!" said the third supervisor. "What psycho?" asked one of the workers. "Smite! He rammed the forklift into that poor guy over there and bashed me over the head with my own clipboard before running off." "Neo Smite?" said Daniels in confusion. "Well, it wasn't the fucking boogeyman!" yelled the third supervisor. "Ease your tone, worker!" "Shut up and get security to find that son of a bitch!" "Where did he go?" asked the first supervisor. "He went out... went outside!" "Tall brooding motherfucker!" said another worker. "Let's get him!" A riot of heavy, able-bodied men in boiler suits began to form. They rushed towards the platform through the rolling gate opening, but were too late. Neo was zooming off like a suicidal race car driver. Although the toll attendant tried waving at him to stop, Neo sped up. The attendant dove out the way with half a second to spare as Neo drove right through the toll barrier, swerving onto the road and taking off at high speed as some of his co-workers aimlessly chased after him. "Stay here!" yelled Daniels. "Stay here! Do not pursue him! Stay at your posts!" "What the hell are you talking about?" Eric screamed. We can't follow all that safety shit, we have to stop him! We're staying here, calling the police and sorting this out properly. We can't lose our heads. Says who? Said one of the other workers. Says me! Everyone just stay here and don't do anything brash or you will be fired. Like how he just fired straight into that guy? Yelled a third worker. That's enough! I'm calling the police right now! Eric, get his license plate number from the toll attendant! Yes, sir! Said Eric in an angry, sarcastic tone. Eric jumped off the platform and made his way over to the toll. Daniels glared into the distance before returning to the warehouse. As Neo drove with a blank look on his face, a car turned a corner and he almost crashed into it. The driver of the car managed to swerve out of the way and crashed into a pole, allowing Neo to escape unscathed. A few pedestrians rushed over to the scene of the crash. A woman began screaming and an older man started to feel the need to throw up. Smashed through the windscreen with plenty of grisly cuts, twists and bruises, Nathan lay dead on the hood of his car, his lifeless, wide-open eyes staring at the sky. At the Smite house, Hattie, Tom and Fiona were at the kitchen table having their dinner. It was a coldly silent meal with no conversation. A lot weighed on Hattie's mind since it had been such an odd day. Fiona teased Tom by sticking her spoon into his mashed potatoes, so he hit her spoon away with his fork in retaliation. Hattie looked up, prompting them to stop and fall silent. I want you both to return to your rooms straight after dinner, she said. I've had a long day, as have you, and I think we all need to relax. Seriously? I could go over the water park right now if you and Dad drove me there right now. He swallowed his food and apologised, claiming he was simply tired. Tom swallowed his food and apologised, claiming he was simply tired. Well, you can read a book or do your homework, God forbid, said Hattie. And Fiona, you can put that machine to use. Do you have a lot of materials left? I have a few, said Fiona. I'll come and tuck you both in at bedtime. They all continued to eat silently. The air became tense. The phone on the wall rang. Unwilling to answer it, Hattie simply left it ringing until it eventually stopped. In Daniel's office, he sat at his desk with the supervisor and some of the workers, including Eric, waiting impatiently for the operator to connect him to the police. The operator got back on the line and told Daniels that she couldn't get through. Oh, come on, it's the police, goddammit! Yelled Daniels. Why can't you get through? It's been a surprisingly busy day and a lot of calls are coming in, said the operator. You'll just have to be patient. Alright, well keep trying! Believe me, I am, sir. The line cut back to the queue. Everyone was becoming extremely agitated. This is torture, said Eric. Shut up, said Daniels. The second supervisor walked in and everyone turned to him. Well, said the first supervisor. I tried calling the house but no one picked up, said the second supervisor. Well, keep trying then, barked Eric. Jesus! Taken aback by Eric's attitude, the supervisor looked to Daniels for approval. He nodded at the supervisor, so he nodded back and left the office. Daniels continued to wait for someone to pick up the phone. Back at the Smite house, Fiona was working as quietly as possible at her sewing machine, making herself a skirt with floral patterning. Tom was on his bed reading a Hustler magazine, mainly out of obligation brought on by peer pressure as opposed to actual interest in women at his young and naive age. Downstairs, Hattie was in the middle of cleaning the dishes. The phone began to ring again. She sighed, turned the taps off, dried her hands, marched over to the phone, pressed the receiver button, and left the phone balancing on top of the receiver. She returned to the sink and continued to do the dishes very aggressively, trying to resist smashing them as opposed to making sure they were clean. Back in Daniel's office, he managed to get through to the police, explaining in detail the atrocities one of his best and most respected workers had committed, and demanding that they send officers immediately.
Look, we understand, sir, but we're short on units right now. We have been all day,
said the policeman.
We're sending a car each to your location and the Smite House, but there'll be another 15 minutes at least.
What about at most? Said Daniels.
I couldn't tell you, but 15 minutes at least. Just try and remain calm. Has the body been tampered with?
No, we haven't touched it.
Alright, the ambulance should arrive before the officers do.
The second supervisor re-entered the office. Daniels asked the officer to wait a moment while he asked the supervisor if he was successful. No, said the second supervisor. I tried at least 5 more times, but it just went straight to not even dialing anymore. Never mind that, said the first supervisor. I'm sure it must have been an accident, but come on, said Eric, outraged. How could it be if he just took off like that? And he was acting weird all day? You really think he'd do that on purpose and go home just to hurt his own family? A loud argument amongst the men erupted. Everyone shouted over one another as they grew increasingly heated, leaving Daniels stressed beyond belief. Shut up! He screamed. Everybody keep your mouths shut! He returned to the phone. Hello?
Yes, I'm still here.
Said the policeman. We weren't able to reach the Smite House, so please hurry.
Like I said, we're being as fast as we can.
Thank you. Within the Smite master bedroom, Hattie was now completely in her own world. Her mind raced rapidly as she smoked and looked forward with an undying stare. Like Neo, she could hear a pulse in her head as visions of her husband, her lover, her children, her awkward interaction with Betty, and her own strict parents haunted her. She was so absorbed into the bizarre visions before her eyes that she didn't hear the sounds of a car pulling up outside, turning off, and someone unlocking and opening the front door before slowly walking up the stairs with heavy steps. She snapped back into reality just as the bedroom door opened, very hurriedly putting her cigarette out in the ashtray. Tommy continued to read Hustler. He eventually heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. Becoming completely still, he listened more carefully in case they were coming towards his room. Realizing they were, he shoved the magazine under his pillow and stared at the ceiling with both hands on his chest. The person opened the door. Hey, Dad, said Tom. Did Mum give you some chicken, or do you have to starve with only potatoes and a little bit of salad? Neo said nothing. After a few moments of dead silence, a confused Tom opened his mouth to say something, only to be silenced by Neo suddenly charging at him. Before Tom could even comprehend what was going on, Neo grabbed him by the face, forced him against the wall, and began to crush the boy's jaw with his bare hands. At the Leone house, Betty entered and very quietly closed the door behind her, leaning back against it and sighing. She put a hand to her head and walked towards the staircase. Where have you been? Asked a voice from the shadows. Betty was startled before recognising the voice as that of her 45-year-old husband Sal, a physically intimidating but soft-spoken man. He stood in the darkness of the doorway between the main hall and the dining area. She put a hand to her chest and began to chuckle. Jesus, Sal, you scared me, she said. Sorry, he said. Where were you? I was at the diner with the other parents. And Francesca's staying at Karen's tonight? Yeah, otherwise she'd be here, wouldn't she? I guess so. You off to bed? Yeah, I'm pretty tired. I need to go around to the Smite house tomorrow anyway. I gotta speak to Hattie, you know? Okay. Well, don't go to sleep right away. I might be up for some, Yeah, I know, said Betty. Good night, Sal. Good sunset, Sal joked. Betty gave Sal a very sarcastic laugh. A smiling Sal retreated back into the dining area to treat himself to another glass of brandy. Betty, on the other hand, was straight into the master bedroom and taking sleeping pills to ensure that Sal wouldn't receive any action. Back at the Smite house, Fiona was still going at it with her sewing machine. As she put the finishing touches on her skirt, she didn't hear her father enter the room or realise he was watching her from behind the partly open bedroom door. She stopped, sensing her father before slowly turning to face him. "Daddy?" she said. "Was I being too loud?" Neo said nothing. He didn't even move. "Do you want to help me resize the waist like you did when we made Mummy that dress she liked?" Visions of Hattie as a grotesque, bloodied, torn-apart corpse covered in knife wounds appeared before Neo's eyes, cementing exactly what was on his mind as Fiona's slightly nervous eyes looked up at her father. Neo stepped into the room and very calmly closed the door behind him, not taking his eyes off of Fiona.